Thank you again for the assistance. So hello, everybody again. Nice to see everybody here. I really love coming to this chapter, and I'm really happy to share with you guys about not just about kestrels and kind of who they are as a bird species, but a little bit about the work that we contribute to through the Sharon Audubon Center and some of the conservation opportunities that we have available to us here in Connecticut. To avoid me fumbling around with the Zoom, I am going to do my very best. I realize I cannot see my notes in these slides right now, but I think I'm going to be okay. So if you kind of see me pausing for a second, it's because I'm desperately trying to remember something that was in my notes on a slide. All right, very good. So again, in tonight's program, we are going to be diving into learning a little bit about, again, who kestrels are as a bird and some of the adaptations that make them so special, not just as a falcon species, but as a very small bird of prey that has to kind of get along in the world being so small. And then again, we're going to take a look at the work that we do to help monitor and preserve these birds here in Connecticut. I will be sure to distinguish when we get to this part the fact that our work is a part of somebody else's work. And I'm sure many of you will know the name that I mentioned as to whose program this is when we get to that part of the presentation. Then we're going to jump to some current research about kestrels and what that research is telling us about their populations as it currently stands. And then again, we're going to go through some of the conservation opportunities for this bird here in the state, which I have to say are pretty darn exciting this year, thanks to, and especially to a bill that's right now in the legislature that we'll talk about. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. So these little guys are, as probably it comes to no surprise to many of you, the smallest falcon here in the United States. Let me see a quick show of hands as to how many of you have seen kestrels out in the wild before. Yeah, very good. I really actually love looking for them because I find that I think they're probably overlooked a lot because of their small size, right? It's really fun to look for them on these telephone wires because from a distance, you might mistake it for a robin or a blue jay or even a meadowlark if it's the right season. But it always feels so rewarding when I'm driving up to this open space and I see a silhouette on the telephone wire. And then looking closely, I see that it is in fact a kestrel due to those unforgettable, really distinguishable markings there. So again, very tiny, probably often overlooked due to their small size. One thing that really sets this falcon apart, though, from other birds of prey in the country is the fact that it is what we refer to as sexually dimorphic. Or in other words, there's a difference in appearance between the male and the female in this particular bird of prey. Who can tell me really quickly the way that we determine who is male and female in virtually every other species of bird of prey? Size. Yep, somebody said it. So size. Who is going to be bigger? Tell me male or female? Female, very good. Yep. So that's normally how we're going to be telling, who's who when we're looking at a pair that's sitting side by side like these guys. The female is still going to be slightly larger than the males in the species, but really the main way that we're going to be telling them apart is by looking at the color of their plumage, right? I love this photo because we can see this very nice, crisp, bluish. I think I left my pointer over here. Is it maybe somewhere over there? I had a little pointer earlier that Angela was so kind to lend me. Perfect. Oh, there it is. Woohoo. Oh, thank you. All right. Just going, woo. All right, there we go. Yeah, so we have this really nice blue-gray here on the wing of the male, and then we have this little nice patch that we can look for too. The female sometimes will have some remnant of that slaty gray color on the top of the head, but we usually do not see that color on the wings and instead see that warm kind of cinnamon brown with those dark streaks throughout. So again, that is very special and unique to birds of prey here in this country. No other bird has that way to be able to tell those two apart. These guys have a pretty wide range, as we're going to see here in a second. They are by no means limited here to the eastern United States or even to New England, but spread all throughout different parts of North America, up into Canada and Alaska, and then we even see them being residents down in South America. I'm going to bring out this pointer again. So when we're looking at this kind of peachy color here is where they're going to be found year-round, where they're residents. This is where they're breeding up north here, and this is where they're overwintering in this kind of bluish color. Let me see a quick show of hands as to how many have used this Audubon's Bird Migration Explorer tool. Oh, only a few of you. Okay, Excellent. The next time you guys are on any sort of web browser and you're looking up a bird or you're looking up information of a bird, I highly encourage you to go to this website up here, explorer.audubon.org, because scientists at Audubon have compiled all of these studies from like half a century of bird research, and they've put it into this really interactive tool that allows you to explore a lot of different features relative to your selected bird species. Now, of course, I can't show you that because this is just a still photo of the web page that I was on, but if we go up here, these toggles are all clicked on. If we were looking at this in real time on the website, all these little dots right here would be moving in according to the season that you see down below. And this is really cool because when you put certain toggles on here, like one of these, it says Journey of a Tracked Bird, it will actually show you 7, they'll show up as like little yellow dots. It'll show you the number of birds that have actually been tracked with radio transmitters, and it'll show you their specific journey. You'll see where they grew up, where they were hatched, where they flew down to, where they spent the winter, and where they came back up and then were breeding the following year. So it's very interactive in that way. And then what I really love too, see if I can get my little pointer down here, woohoo, are these little bars that you can explore too. Conservation statistics, you can see kind of what their primary threats are, and then you can explore some other things too. So again, very interactive and very fun. And so I highly recommend you guys check it out. All right, wow, I love seeing this on the big screen. This looks really good. All right. So when we talk about some of the physical adaptations, what are some of the things that come to mind for you all? What are some of the things on their body that are something that are physical characteristics that you think would help them to survive in the wild? What was that? Their feet, yeah, right, with those sharp talons, certainly. Being able to grab onto their prey, which we'll talk about in a second. What else? Their beak, yeah. And not just that they have the beak of sort of your stereotypical raptor, which is curved and sharp for being able to tear into that live animal prey. But these guys, as a falcon, have something, a little bit of a trick up their sleeve too, relative to their beak. And that is this word, this tomial tooth here. So the tomial tooth, kind of try to get a close up for you guys to see it because it can be kind of tricky, is the actual remnant of an ancient reptilian tooth that is on the side of the beak that actually serves as a little notch that the falcon will press into the spinal cord of its rodent prey, and it allows it to just instantly sever the spine. You can imagine that that's really helpful for a bird who's very tiny, right? These guys are really not much bigger than a robin. And so being able to get their feet on a mouse who maybe, I don't know, sometimes maybe a third the size of them, it's going to be really important for them to mobilize them as fast as they can. So A, the prey doesn't escape, and B, so that they don't potentially become injured by that prey. So it's very cool. The next time you guys see a falcon up close, whether that's Bob at the annual LHAS picnic or otherwise, you want to look for this little tomial tooth because again, it's unique to falcons and only a couple of other birds in the world. When we're talking about a bird that is diurnal and that is hunting during the day, and that just in general is a hunting bird, right? Its eyes are going to be really important. And so we can tell just by looking at the skull here, the size of that ocular cavity, that eye socket, the fact that it takes up a lot of space in the skull tells us that that is the primary sense that this animal is using, right? That it's extremely important into helping it find its food. And we'll talk about the mallard stripe here a second. Let me ask you guys, actually, I'm sure you guys have probably heard this fact before about kestrels and other falcons and this black stripe below their eye. So what does it do for them? Helps them see better. How? Yeah. Oh, hi, Mia. Yeah, it actually works to deflect the sunlight that's coming into their eyes when they're up soaring over these open habitats that they're hunting in, right? So if they were to spend all this time in the day and they didn't have this adaptation to shield their eyes from the sunlight, they'd probably be getting blinded by it all the time. And that would really interfere with the fact that they are diving, right? They go into those magnificent stoops head first down after that animal prey. They don't need the sun getting into their eyes when they're doing that. And so that mallard stripe helps deflect that. Oh, yeah. Yes, I can.
Okay, so they can see the
Oh,
Zoom now.
perfect. Okay, cool. Okay, awesome. Thanks, Rich. All right, got this tool for the people on Zoom too. Great. So the last sort of physical feature that I think is really helpful to kestrels being so small are these two eye spots here on the back of the head. Right, so these guys, they get eaten all the time. We're learning more and more due to feeder watch data and some other science reports that are coming out about kestrel predation and kestrel populations dwindling in some areas, that we're seeing an increase in predation by Cooper's hawks in particular. And so the eye spots on the back of their head are really to help them, try to become a bit more intimidating, kind of less snackable perhaps to some of these predators that are hunting them. Aerial raptors mainly, but also maybe be a little intimidating to birds that might tend to mob them too, right? If we have like blackbirds that are trying to chase them out of their territory, they might think twice if they see these gigantic eyes in the back of the bird's head. All right, and when we talk about a behavioral adaptation for this species, there is really one thing that sets kestrels apart from most other birds. And if you guys haven't seen this before, I think you're really going to think it's neat. Go. Oh, there's a little bit of a delay. Ooh. Anticlimactic. All right. It is not wanting to play this video, and so I might have to just quickly describe it. This was a great video clip that's available on YouTube that was taken in Essex County in New York State, and it is of a kestrel that is just hovering, just being completely still with its wings going a mile a minute, just hovering, looking down on prey that it spots from above. So what are two other birds? There are really only two other birds in the world that have the ability to keep their body completely still, but their wings in motion. Hummingbird. What's the other one? Ooh, so osprey. I didn't think of that one. Ooh, good guess. Ooh, good guess. Okay, there might be more. What was that? Ooh, kingfisher is a good one too. The other one I was thinking of was a northern harrier. Yeah, not quite the same acrobatics because it's so much larger, but again, yes, if you guys just Google, I don't know why this isn't playing, sorry about that, but if you guys just Google kestrel hovering, it's pretty amazing what they're able to do. So when we start to talk about preferable kestrel habitat, we're really looking at something like this, something that has at least an acre of open fields, and it doesn't really have to be field, it doesn't have to be fallow field or agricultural field. It could be some type of wetland, like a bog, it could be a fen. But in our area, we see a lot of these really productive fields. And so along with that minimum number of 1 acre of open field, we want to see contiguous fields that are really adjacent to that field where the nest box or the tree cavity is too, for plenty of hunting space for that bird. So this photo was actually taken on Butter Road, very close to the Sharon Audubon Center. And I took it here because we actually have a nest box that's right on the other side of this barn structure. Yeah. And so we'll talk about how many nest boxes we monitor here in just a second. But when we're talking about where we want to be placing a kestrel box, that is really one of the most important factors, this habitat, and making sure that we have plenty of open space for them to be able to hunt in because of all the things that they're hunting for in those open fields. Being the size that they are, what are some of the animals that you guys think they're hunting for in these environments? Rodents, number one. Yeah, small things like field mice, maybe a shrew. Very good. Yes. Yes, we are definitely going to be emphasizing insects. And I think I've already sort of subtly put in some photos of kestrels catching insects in here because that's going to relate to this piece of legislation I mentioned earlier that's hopefully going to go through in Connecticut this year, fingers crossed, about protecting our state's insects. Yeah, so insects, whether that's caterpillars, whether that's grasshoppers or other similar insects. What else? Yeah, yeah, right. A part of their Latin name actually, Sparverius. Uh-huh, yep, relates to their tendency to hunt sparrows, especially in England when people were first noticing them. Yeah. Yeah, winged insects too, sometimes snakes, sometimes other small reptiles and amphibians, but a lot of insects. If there's anything that I want you guys to take away from today, it's that insects are a really critical component of the American Kestrel's diet. Yeah, so when we're thinking about babies getting fed, right, and healthy clutches being reared and populations being stable, we definitely want to be thinking about and seeing instances like this, where babies are being able to be fed a healthy amount of insects because our insects are protected and they're abundant. So show of hands here again. How many of you guys know Art Ginger? Oh, really? I expected the room to be half full of people who know this gentleman. So if Art is on here, I don't know if he's on, but Art, if you are on, I hope that I do you proud by giving you a solid intro to your program that you started here all these years ago. So Art Ginger, the gentleman here on this slide, is really the man that is responsible for starting this American Kestrel Nest Box program all the way back in the 1970s. He was very active in reviewing the literature that existed at the time and was concerned that there just weren't enough cavity nesting sites for birds that included certainly the kestrel, but also the barred owl and a couple of other species. Bluebirds was the other one. And so he actually had designed his own designs for these nest boxes and was putting them up all over the place in Connecticut where he thought they would be most suitable in their respective habitats. He grew the Kestrel program tremendously as it began to take off simply by going door to door. Mike Dudek, the land manager at the Sharon Center, tells me that he was an absolutely incredible salesperson and that he would go to private landowners' homes. He would typically have a poster of the American Kestrel, and he would talk to them about the habitat needs for this bird, the spatial needs, and the important thing that they would be doing if they were willing to host a nest box. And he sold it to a lot of people. So it's really Art that we have to thank for the fact that, at one point in Connecticut, there were as many as 95 American Kestrel boxes throughout the state of Connecticut. And even still to this day, you can see my last little bullet point there at the bottom. He by himself monitors about 60 boxes throughout the state of Connecticut, right? And we'll talk about what exactly that monitoring consists of here in a second, but there's really a tremendous, tremendous effort on his part. And of course, not everybody was completely sold on it for a couple of reasons, but a lot of people were. When he was recruiting people for this program, there were really a couple of things that he was looking for. One, of course, he was looking for habitat that was suitable for this bird, right? So he was approaching people that he knew had the minimum number of acreage required for this bird to be successful. And preferably, these were also farmers who weren't using agricultural pests like insecticides or other types of pests that would potentially be harmful for the species. But also, it was, of course, important that the landowners were comfortable with him making multiple visits to be able to check on those boxes too. And, for some people, that just wasn't something that they were okay with. But a lot of people were. And so, like I said, it was really in its heyday. We had a lot of boxes in the state. But, things change. And some of those boxes had to come down. Sometimes structures like this barn here come down on people's property and there's nowhere to put the box. Sometimes the box just isn't successful. If it was on a tree in a productive field, it might have been experiencing starlings coming in and taking over the box, and when you have starlings that are reproducing year after year, that's not really what you want to be going for. So it just didn't make sense to keep some of those boxes up. But we have a really good number of boxes still in the state of Connecticut that he's monitoring and that we help support too. So when we talk about our Kestrel program, we're very clear in that our work is contributing to Art Gingert's work as part of his larger Kestrel monitoring nest box program here in the state. So we only maintain a very tiny number of boxes, 13 in northwestern Connecticut. And ideally, we would visit those boxes only 2 times because even with 13, you can imagine the time that takes to go to all these locations in the spring and summer in a short window of time to be able to check on things, but we end up usually making about 3 different visits. The first, we're going to be looking for the presence of eggs or an incubating female that's in the box. The adults typically start to come back around March, and so we aim to have those boxes cleaned out at least by the first week of April. Has anybody ever stuck their face, well, not literally, but has anybody ever seen the inside of a Kestrel box before? Russ, yeah, what is it like in there? Yeah, it's pretty rough inside there, isn't it? Yeah, exactly. So unlike bluebirds whose parents are carrying out those fecal sacs, right, to keep the box relatively tidy, Kestrels do not do that. So when the babies are defecating, it's just going all over the interior of the box. And actually, when you guys come up and view this box, and if any of you are so inclined to take any of Art's nest box plan designs here, it's worth noting that he actually enlarged the box from the original design that was available in Connecticut because of the desire to give those babies more space, right? Because they're making such a mess in there, because we don't want them just squashed up against their own waste, right? We gave them a little bit more room. So I think that was a really good idea. So we try to go in, we clean everything up, we scrape all the mess out from last year. And again, we really try to get that done before the first week of April because we know they're going to be coming back in April. How many of you guys have participated in a Christmas bird count through the club or elsewhere? Awesome. How many of you guys have seen kestrels on your Christmas bird count? Yeah, so it's not terribly unusual for us to get kestrels at our Christmas bird count, and it seems like for you guys is too. Though typically we tend to get them in the state of New York where there are really expansive farm fields that they like to hang out in. So some will roll the dice and stay here year round, but a lot of them do tend to migrate. So on the second visit to the boxes, we're definitely looking for the presence of nestlings. You know, if the eggs hatch and everything goes well, we'll see fluffy, adorable nestlings in there. And on the third visit, we ban them. And we'll talk a little bit about that process, and you guys will get to see some great photos too. So this is what the eggs look like. Yeah. So if all goes well and the female's healthy and the habitat's right, we'll see 5 eggs in that box. Females will lay anywhere between 2 and 5. So it's always a really good sign when we see a full clutch of 5 like that. How cute are these guys? Yeah. This guy, I took a look at this guy today and I thought that, I don't know, I kind of felt like this kestrel, like the temps are getting colder again. And I felt like this is how I looked, how my response was when I saw the weather this week. Looking at the cold temps again, I was like, no, as much as I like winter. So again, if things are going well, right, and the eggs hatch and the female didn't get eaten by anything, and she's able to continue incubating those eggs and feeding the babies, on our second visit, we hope to see these cute little cotton balls in there. One thing that's been interesting to see as I visited some of the boxes with our land manager, Mike, during the summertime, is the rapid growth of their legs. So it doesn't take long for these legs to grow big and strong in the first week or so after hatching. And so technically on our second visit, we could actually put a band around this leg because with the appearance of this leg as it is in this photo, it's really not going to be growing anymore during this bird's life. So we could put a band without worry that it's going to chafe or cause any discomfort to the bird at this period. However, it is actually really fun to see the birds when they get a little bit older so that you can start to sex them, right? I don't know if you guys have ever seen a sort of intermediary kestrel like this before, but they are really cute when they have this little baby fuzz that's still hanging on with their adult feathers that are coming in. So again, this guy's a little young, right? You can see he mostly has his juvenile down there. So we can't quite tell if he's going to be a male or a female, but what can you guys tell me about this one? What do you think? Male or female? Ooh, what did you say, Russ? Oh, little hen. Yes, yes, yes. I thought you said N and I was yeah, little hen, little female, right? We see this nice cinnamon brown throughout. We don't see any of that slaty gray blue on the wings or on the head. So we know that this is going to be a female. Right? And when we put a band on, right, we have the proper license to be able to do that. Another important thing about banding at this age is that this kestrel here on the right side is probably somewhere between 19 and 21 days old. And we really don't want to go any older than that. And we don't want to do that because as they get older and they get really close to approaching fledging, they get really jumpy. And not only do they get jumpy and really restless and tend to jump out of our hands when we're trying to hold them and band them, they also can really grip onto you. They like develop like suddenly like superhuman strength in their feet and talons, and we don't want to get footed by them either. So we tend to really take advantage of this kind of sweet window where we can tell whether they're boys or girls and whether and they're still not going to be too jumpy for us to be able to handle. And two, when they get to this age, it's kind of sweet to have a little bit of fun with them too. Mike always does what he calls a family portrait every year, where we take the young from the box and we kind of move them together and we get all the babies in one shot. So this is a great example here on the left side of the screen of them being right at that Goldilocks age where they're not jumping out of the bucket. If these guys were probably just even a few days older than what they are here, they would be going absolutely bananas in that bucket and we would not be able to contain them without a lid, right? So right now they're on their backs, they're like sort of defenseless. The first thing they'll do is sort of shoot up their feet if they feel threatened, but that's really all they're going to do. And it thus allows us to take really cute photos. And of course, in doing this work, this is a really powerful engagement tool for a whole lot of different stakeholders, for our volunteers, for some of our interns that come to work with us who likely have never seen this bird before, let alone seen the work that we do with them in this kind of monitoring. And of course, for the people who have these nest boxes on their properties too. This is a delightful landowner and box owner, Barbara Zucker-Pinshoff, if any of you know her. She's a resident in Sharon and did provide us with several excellent photos for this presentation, and has been the happy owner of a box that has hosted many, many broods of kestrels over the 10 plus years that she's had them. So I think it really, for people who are willing to host a box on their property, it pays dividends, and not only knowing that you're doing something really good for kestrels and putting out babies every year if it's a good spot, but the fact that you also kind of get to be part of the process and see them through their development, I think is pretty special. So this was a pretty unique and really lovely circumstance that we are a part of a couple of years ago, where one of our volunteers here, Claudia, in our rehab clinic, had been in a horse barn that she visits in Lakeville. And during probably in the month of June, she just happened to find this little orphaned kestrel who was just by itself near a woodpile, nowhere near any nest cavity. After a little further inspection, there was a box that was discovered on the property's premise. So we don't know exactly what happened. It seems somewhat likely that, or at least a possibility that a predator had raided the nest and tried to grab a baby and then maybe dropped it as it was carrying it out. We don't know for sure, but she brought it into a rehab clinic. We were able to rehabilitate it. And then after working with Art here, we were actually able to identify one of his boxes that he monitors who had siblings that were of similar age. So we were actually able to do what's called fostering in that little bird, where because it was so similar in the age that we could just kind of like boop, sneak it in the nest box. And the parents really don't know the difference, believe it or not. You'd think they would know, right? After like working so tirelessly to feed all these babies throughout the course of their development, you just kind of again, boop, pop one in and they're like, all right, I'm okay with that. So yeah, it was a pretty happy ending for that little baby. Not sure what the relations were like with the siblings there, whether they liked it or not, but it's a pretty happy ending for that little guy. Yeah, so let's talk about what their populations are doing. Unfortunately, this bird has declined a cumulative percentage of about 53 in the last half century. Yeah, so that's a lot of birds, right? That first bullet point says about 2 million kestrels have been lost since 1970. And in trying to identify what the main cause is, it's still very perplexing to scientists who are studying these birds because there's really no smoking gun, so to speak. There's not really one identifiable cause that's driving this decline, but rather a collection of things that we think and that evidence supports that are contributing to these population losses across the country. Look at the second bullet point here before we get into these causes. I think I was really struck by that in research for this presentation, where at northeastern US, we are losing kestrels at a pretty astonishing rate. We've lost as much as 90% of our kestrels in the last half century, which is not, it feels important for me to note that it's not due to lack of effort, from Northeast states and trying to preserve these birds. In fact, there's a larger network of kestrel conservation organizations or conservation orgs that do kestrel monitoring and kestrel conservation that have nest box programs that they actively monitor, that they're actively maintaining throughout throughout Maryland, throughout Vermont, and maybe even some states that are further up than us. So again, it's not for lack of effort, but we're looking at some of these little sub bullet points below here as contributing factors, right? Loss of insects and other prey due to climate change and habitat alteration. We know that fields are a habitat that are very easy to convert into other things like parking spaces, like condominium lots, et cetera, et cetera. And so loss of that habitat and, oh, solar, somebody mentioned. Yeah, that can be really tricky too, right? Those huge solar operations that take up massive amounts of acreage, right? Where it's just like a huge solar field and nothing else. Yeah, we're learning that that probably isn't the right way to do that, right? To be able to generate solar energy because of how it's affecting our wildlife. Yeah, so loss of insects, alteration of habitat, whether through solar or other reasons. And of course, the sort of widespread application of pesticides and neotoxic neonicotinoids. So neonicotinoids is going to come up in this bill we're going to mention in just a second, but hopefully that's going to be a big win for us in the state of Connecticut in helping to not only protect our pollinating insects, but then further up the food chain, really help to protect our kestrels and other wildlife who depend on those insects for food. Starling competition for nest cavities is another possible contributing factor to kestrel decline. Starlings are not shy about taking boxes like other bird species are. You know, for how many of you guys have bluebird boxes, for example? Yeah, quite a few of you guys. So you guys know that depending on where you place your bluebird box, if you place it in the middle of an open space, you're going to have a less likelihood of sparrows coming in there, like house sparrows or like wrens, because they don't like to be out in the open, right? Starlings really do not care. They will colonize boxes if they find them. And so it can be really difficult to try to do something beneficial for kestrels when you have starlings that are constantly invading your boxes all the time. And the last kind of contributing factor that I talked a little bit about earlier was just increased predation by Cooper's hawks. Not in all parts of the range, but in some, this is becoming more of a problem. So these are just a couple of graphs that you guys can take a look at. One there from Kate Mee's Hawk Watch shows a decline in kestrels that are coming through their fall migration hawk watch over the years. And then the one on the right is the USGS breeding bird survey that is just showing a decline in kestrels that they're finding during the breeding season. So this photo here was from an Audubon issue. Did anybody read this Kestrel article in Audubon magazine? It was maybe last year, the year before. So I have it on my table if you guys want to take a look at it, but it really gave some excellent information on kind of where kestrel conservation is at. And something that one of the scientists mentioned was that, you know, a lot of these areas that are trying to bolster their kestrels, we're putting out babies, like with our Kestrel Nest Box program, we're putting out babies, but some of these studies are finding that fewer adults are coming back up from migration year after year. And so it was interesting when I was looking at some of these other studies, is that not only is that the case, but it just seems like we're getting fewer kestrels, right? Just in general, right? That are going south in the fall, that are coming back up during the opposite time of year. So let's talk a little bit about this. I'm really going to do my best here. I had some solid notes and I was going to sort of read them verbatim so as to make sure I cover the important points of this bill. So bear with me as I do my best to describe this. So House Bill 6916, it's called an act concerning the use of neonicotinoids, but a sort of nickname for it here in Connecticut is sort of the pollinator protection bill. Did anybody hear about this or did anybody see an action alert about this? Yes. Okay. A couple hands. Yes. Excellent. So we at the Sharon Center, because we have an ambassador Kestrel and because we contribute to Art's Kestrel work through our monitoring program, we have launched this Kestrel Pledge program that really helps to sort of not just educate people about the needs of kestrels, but allow them to take action. And one of those bullet points in this pledge involves supporting this bill in Connecticut, this pollinator protection bill that would really put some seriously tight restrictions on people, companies, entities, their ability to be able to use neonicotinoids. So a couple bullet points there. One regarded the distribution of these things I have listed there, corn, wheat, and soybean. So one major factor of this bill is that it will prevent any of those seeds from being used if they are coated with neonics. which is a pretty widespread practice, I think, here, both in the states of Connecticut and New York. So that's going to be pretty important, again, for pollinators and for these birds too. But then the second sub-bullet point there, another really excellent part of this bill talked about the treatments of public and private spaces. And so they basically said that like maybe 10 or so different kinds of public spaces would not be able to use neonics in any type of spraying capacity. So that included golf courses, that include parks, that included recreational spaces. I'm not going to remember all of them, but it included a lot of really common public spaces that I think will be really important when we think about the cumulative impact that'll have on all of these places that probably do routinely use neonics that will not be able to anymore. Granted, it is important for me to mention that if this bill goes through this year, that those changes will not take place until 2028 in the first bullet point and 2029 in the second. So it'll be a couple of years out, but we have a lot of hope about it going through because of New York State having adopted this legislation last year. So we're really hoping that we can do that this year. I really wanted to provide you guys with the link for an Audubon action alert to be able to take action, sign a pledge, or not sign the pledge, but at least get your name out there in support of this bill. But it sounds like the comment period has been closed. So stay tuned if you guys subscribe to Audubon emails. If not, it's a good idea for more of these action alerts to come to you. But if you do, then keep your eyes peeled for sort of the next steps as this bill progresses. And then as luck would have it, I printed like about 30 of these flyers before I came here, really excited to be able to get them out. And then I forgot them all on the printer. So you will have to look it up on our website. Sorry, everybody. But we are excited to have this new series that we're starting up. It's called Policy Potluck. And we are excited to be hosting these two ladies who have been very active in the town of Greenwich and really advocating for this piece of legislation and compiling really an incredible amount of information that helped to really form the skeleton of this bill. So we feel very privileged that they are going to be talking about, just what neonicotinoids are, providing an overview, and then providing some really specific information as to what this bill will do. So, and actually works out well because I didn't have my notes today to look up the specific language. You guys will just have to come to Policy Potluck and then learn a little bit more specifics here. So mark your calendars for this event on March 20th from 6 to 7:30 with us at the Sharon Audubon Center. And I always think that I have one more slide after that, but it looks like I'm done. So I'd be happy to take any questions now. Yeah. Yeah, so you want at least 1 acre of open land for a nest box, but preferably you would have some adjacent open space too. It wouldn't just be restricted to that 1 acre that you have maybe on your property. It's okay if that's separated by, like a shrubby border or a road. Yeah, that's fine. Mm-hmm. Yep, that's fine. But oh, yep, I'm so sorry. So the question there for everybody on Zoom was what was the minimal number of acreage necessary to be able to host a kestrel nest box? And so again, that was 1 acre. Yeah, I'm sorry, there's another question? Oh, great question. Yeah, so when we're doing the banding, sometimes mom and dad are out hunting, but sometimes if one of the parents is in the box and we go up there, they will flush and sometimes they'll hang around. Often they will hang around just kind of screeching and, kind of telling us to get out of there and buzz off. So we do see them pretty often when we go. Yeah. Yeah, but you may have noticed, let's see if I can zoom back here. When we're up in the boxes, let's see, we do take care to put a little stopper in the hole. There you go. Right. We want to make sure that, especially as they're getting close to fledging, that they don't accidentally prematurely fledge by jumping out of that box when we're going up and down. So that's what that bag is, if anybody was wondering earlier on. Yeah. Oh, that would have been such a great statistic to have for tonight. I'm sorry that I don't have that answer for you. That would have been really good. No, I don't. We do know that there tends to be, pretty high site fidelity with these birds. And so meaning that the parents are, coming back year after year if the box was successful. If the box was not successful, if the pairing was unsuccessful, then they're going to be less likely to return to that spot. Instead, look for another mate, look for another place, where they can have better luck. Yeah. Not that I'm aware of. Good question, Mia. The question was whether the boxes have to be in a certain direction. And I don't think that they do necessarily. You wanna put them at least 12 to 15 feet, but sometimes they can be higher too. Some of them are 20, 25 feet up on the side of a barn or on the side of a silo. However, of course, that presents its own challenges in being able to access the box too, right? There are some there are some like really excellent photos of art. There's one on our website actually where he's like bungee corded to like the side of a silo and he has like all this equipment and he looks so cool. It's like effortless. He's up there and I think like probably 99% of other people would be uncomfortable with that. Yeah. Good question. I think the question was again whether they mate for life. I think again, if they're successful the year prior and rearing a brood, that pair will tend to want to go back to that same site where they had success. So it is possible that they could pair up the next year. But if one doesn't show up, then they will search for another mate for sure. Yeah. I will say that you don't see any photos of nest boxes on a tree, which might make sense for being able to put a nest box so high up, because that tends to be really easily accessed by predators like raccoons. Raccoons, climbing cats, anything that has an arm that can reach in there is a threat to them. We really don't have to worry about climbing snakes here. We don't really have a high population of black rat snakes up where we are, so we don't have to worry about them too much. But certainly in other areas where they're more prevalent, that would be another predator to want to be able to safeguard against. Oh, yes, Angela.
Another caveat, I ran into a friend last week who lives in Newtown, and he has a big open hillside, and he put up a nest box. I think it was quite high, like it was 12 or so feet. And the second year, birds came and nested, and it was absolutely wonderful. Last year, they came back and were nesting, and for reasons that he didn't quite understand, and I certainly didn't, was some people came and mowed the field around the box and scared the birds, and they left.
Oh, they just deserted entirely?
They deserted mowing. So obviously, he's going to make sure that doesn't happen again. But that was an interesting caveat.
Wow. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, how terrible. Oh, that must have been. Were there eggs and chicks already in the nest then?
Yes.
Oh. If that ever, and he probably didn't know until it was too late. Did he find them deceased in the box? Oh, okay. Oh.
So he's just hoping they'll come back this year.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yes, exactly. I'll keep my fingers crossed for him. Oh, I saw a hand in the back here. Yeah, go ahead. Great question. It usually just tends to be one box per site.
If you have a large, say you have a 50-acre field.
Yeah. I would say I would still just probably put up that one box there. Yeah, because it sounds like they can defend a territory of up to 100 acres. Yeah, it can be pretty expansive sometimes. And so yeah, so I think just you might just put up one and see how it goes. I think that would be quite successful actually. Yeah, great question. Did I see a hand over here? All right. Oh, yes. Oh, great question. The question for all you folks on Zoom was whether kestrels are here year round, and if not, whether they're coming back soon and when that might be. So some kestrels will stay here during the year. So it's not terribly uncommon for us to get them on Christmas bird counts. For our count at the Trixie Strauss count, we usually get at least one, sometimes two, and that tends to be on the New York State side of things where there are these really expansive ag fields that they like to hang out in. So some will really roll the dice and kind of risk it in the wintertime. But a lot of them do migrate, even if it's not very far. We tend to see this leapfrogging effect in a lot of different migratory species of birds, whether it's kestrels, whether it's robins, and a bunch of others where say our kestrels here in Connecticut might not go really far. They might go down to say Florida or Georgia for the winter. But the kestrels further north, say up in Canada or Alaska, they will make a tremendously long migration, and those will be the populations that tend to go far, like to Central America, Costa Rica sort of thing. So our kestrels, they might go down to the coast of Connecticut if it's a very mild winter, or like I said, they might go to the southeast. That's where a lot of them tend to go. But they will be coming back in probably about the month of April. Yeah, late March, early April. Yeah, so it's pretty exciting to start seeing them. I always love driving up on Butter Road by the center and checking that one box. That's when I start looking for kestrels, when I know that they're coming. Yeah.
So, as you clean out the boxes,
Mm.
you having cedar shavings or is there something?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Good question. Yep. We usually put about maybe just a couple of inches there at the bottom, just to create just a little bit of a cushion in there for them. Yeah. Good question. Yes.
Bobolins usually are fledged by the middle of June.
Uh-huh.
Kestrels fledge at similar times so that farmers can coordinate harvest of the hay on the field with the fledge.
I would say they are fledging closer actually to the month of July. Yeah. So usually after, I think at maybe around the time or maybe a little bit after, depending on the schedule when those fields are hayed. Yeah, I think usually July. It's not terribly uncommon to see the young of the year with the parents, like right up until they migrate. For example, there's a box, I think on Westwoods 1, that's quite close to the center. And when I was just having a bike ride last summer, I looked out, I could see one of the kestrels. But then as I looked, I could see another and another and another and another. And so there were the parents, and then there were 4 young that were with them too. And so they were kind of all flying around together. I don't know if they were hunting or if, they were just kind of out together. But yeah, it can be pretty sweet in the month of August to see these families still together before everybody either heads south or kind of goes their separate ways for the winter. Yeah, because these guys really only have one shot when they're breeding, unlike bluebirds, who have sometimes they'll have a second go, they'll have a third go if the season's productive and if the resources are there. These birds of prey, including our kestrels, just have one shot to really raise their young during the year. And they put a lot of time and energy into getting those babies ready and even staying with them weeks after these birds fledge, just feeding them. So it's a pretty long haul for these parents during the spring and summer rearing these guys. Yeah.
Do you do any net tracking banding? Do you get any returns with the bands?
Oh, good question. So the question was whether we get any returns on the bands, and unfortunately, we get few of them. So we're really hoping that in the future we can attach, some geolocators, or some MODIS tags to be able to get a little bit more precise data and more consistent data on where our kestrels are going. That would be the goal. Because as many of you know already, return data on bands on birds is it's not very high. You can hope that you find out where your banded bird goes. The goal is really to find out where these birds are moving to, whether it's through stopover sites so that we can better protect them along their migratory journey, or whether it's more information on where these birds are ultimately ending up in their wintering territory. That's what the goal is with banding, but we get few returns on birds. So that's why the effort is so large, because we get so few returns. The theory is the more bands we put on, the higher chance we have of a return. So yeah, not very many. And sometimes they're deceased, when people find them. So that's always a bummer too. Yeah. I know, I think we had one hit by a car a couple of years ago and somebody gave us a return number on it. Yeah.
Some chat questions.
Oh, chat questions. Okay.
Scroll to the bottom of it.
I will say too that the mortality rate for these guys in their first year is high. It's something like 70%. So only 30% are making it past their first year. Once they get to the second year, they're golden because they're learning so much. They're making so many mistakes in their first year. If they make it and the mistakes don't cost them their lives, by the time they get to second year and they're able to correct those things, we see much higher percentages of birds living beyond 2 years, right? Once they get past their second birthday. All right. Want me to get out of here? Escape. Oh, chat. Oh, goodness. All right. Apologize, everybody. I'm behind on the chat questions. Okay. Mouse pointer. Got that. Okay, great. I see the responses to chat, everybody. Thank you. I'm sorry I wasn't able to follow along earlier. Excellent. Okay. Yes, I'm looking at Zoom questions. Cooper socks. Okay. Why is Cooper hawk predation on kestrels increasing? Increasing. Did I say increasing? Okay. One reason is that we see them becoming more of a resident in some areas of the range. So how many of you guys participate in Project Feeder Watch? A chance, anybody do that? Yeah, good. So actually decades and decades worth of Feeder Watch data is telling us that Cooper's hawks and a lot of their range actually are choosing to stay during the winter in lieu of migrating because actually of the feeders that we put out for our beloved songbirds. So of course that creates like a sort of buffet situation for them. And so they're like, all right, great. Like I can forego all these risks of migrating and all the work and I'll just stay here and kind of pick off these birds at the feeder. Sweet. So unfortunately for our songbirds, that is something that Feeder Watch data is telling us that again, we're not seeing as many Cooper's hawks leaving in the winter and choosing to stay. And so with our kestrels that are choosing to stay, we see increased predation on them then. We also see, just because of habitat alterations in other parts of both of their ranges, they're now coming into closer contact, right? Where otherwise they weren't before. Cooper's hawks are more of an inland forest accipiter, right? They're zooming around all these trees, they're chasing songbirds. Those are their primary prey items. But now that their ranges are coming into closer contact, as forests are being shrank and they're butting up against these open spaces where kestrels are, we see them coming into closer contact to one another. And so we see kestrels becoming more of a menu item for them, unfortunately. Okay, very good. Whoops. Okay. All right. Check with nesting boxes. Okay. Excellent, everybody. Thanks. So one last thing I will mention, because I think I got to everybody in the chat. Great. Right. You guys can see this. Excellent. Okay, thanks. Yeah, so if you guys are interested in getting a box on your property, you can go ahead and email me. You can find me very easily on the Sharon Audubon Center's website. And my email is listed there. It's just my first name, period, last name at audubon.com or at audubon.org. So sorry. So go ahead and find me there. And I will be happy to answer more specific questions about nest box placement. One last thing about nest boxes. Again, I have nest box designs by Art Gingert himself back here that are actually on the DEEP website too. So even if you guys don't collect them tonight, if you just Google Kestrels DEEP, you will find that webpage. And then there's actually a hyperlink that when you scroll down on the page, it'll say find Art Gingert's nest box design here. So you can click on that. Very, very lastly, we have this Kestrel pledge that I mentioned earlier in the presentation that basically says that you are going to commit to 3 things. One is considering putting a nest box on your property or leaving standing trees up, whether they're dead or alive, if they have cavities in them, and if they are safe, of course, that's priority number 1. If they are safe to leave standing, you commit to leaving those as potential habitat for kestrels. The second thing is that with this pledge, you're committing to participating in legislation by maybe signing an action alert that comes out about a bill, for example, this one on Unix when you see it come your way. And the third thing associated with that pledge is that you are eliminating actually sources of standing water in your area, in your yard or at your home, so as to minimize the risk of kestrels contracting West Nile virus. A lot of you guys might have been hearing West Nile is spreading again pretty rampantly throughout our birds of prey. And so we really want to limit these areas where mosquitoes are breeding. So you can sign the pledge over here on my little table, and then you guys get a free sticker when you sign. How about that? All right. That all? Thank you, everybody.